Hey, it's Bradford here, and today we're doing a deck tech on Feral Druid. This is the Alliance version. This is a deck I brewed up a while back for a league, let's say June 2022, and I wanted to try out this card here, the Vestments of Haunted Forest. This was a new card from the Echoes of Thunder set. It's a Druid-only set, and here's the deal. It comes in, it's a 4-cost armor set that comes in with 2 armor counters. Every time you play a Druid card, you add an armor counter. It's really interesting. It kind of plays like a wish card for Magic, where you're accessing your sideboards. It has 2 abilities. The first one lets you, once per turn, take off 2 armor counters and add +1/+1 to an ally for all the tokens you have. It's great for like a token build. We aren't using any tokens or any allies, so we're a solo deck, full feral, so that ability never comes into play. We're using the bottom one, which was changed a little bit, probably because of decks like this, but the bottom ability lets you tap the armor, remove X counters, and then go to your sideboard and put a copy of an ongoing into play equal to the number of counters you removed. So ideally, most of the time you're just going to tap it, remove 1 counter, and then put a copy of a powerful 1-cost ongoing from your sideboard into play. It was changed a little bit, so I'll put the new one up on screen. Here's the card we were putting into play. It's called Wild Incarnation, another card, because Feral's just been kind of really bad for a long time, so here's a card that was attempted to make Feral good again. Wild Incarnation is a Feral talent. Your hero has Assault 1 for each form you control. Usually you can only have 1 form, so Wild Incarnation lets you have any number of forms. Your forms aren't destroyed by striking with weapons or playing non-feral abilities, which is usually another part of forms. Which is why they're kind of so bad, because they were they were originally designed and they were changed a little bit, and they just had a lot of restrictions and none of the power. So this is a 1-cost way to let us get our Wild Incarnations in play, and hopefully a couple copies, put a bunch of forms and ongoing abilities in play, and then just get our hero something like Assault 5 or Assault 10 and attack a few times and win. So I've put the whole sideboard in play because that's what the Vestments is actually doing. You're playing Druid abilities and stacking up counters on your armor so you can put Wild Incarnations in play. We also have some other stuff we'll put into play, but that's the main abilities, Wild Incarnation and Vestments. At the time, Vestments was lets you tap instant speed. Now the main change is that you can only do it on your own turn, and you also can't put duplicate copies of things into play, which we were certainly doing here. So let's move on to the rest of the deck. Another card that was a key one for us was Feral Charge. This is a Feral-only Druid card, just lets you interrupt any card played by your opponent for only 2 mana. You have to have Bear Form, though, so that is a drawback, because if your opponent blows up your Bear Form or discards it or whatever. So just leave it, gives you something, but being a non-mage with a solid interrupt anything is really high power level. Especially because we're playing Alliance, and one of the reasons we wanted to go Alliance was for concerted efforts, a pay-1 quest that lets you reveal the top 3 and get an even card with cost 2 or more. Because our best card really was Vestments, which cost 4, and then our other best card was Feral Charge, which costs 2. Of course, Wild Incarnation is a solid one, and it costs 1, but we're going to be able to get those from the sideboard repeatedly from our Vestments. So the plan was to slow the game down, get a Vestments in play, do a little bit of draw go until we have a huge attack. So let's take a look at the rest of the cards here. Again, 3 Wild Incarnations main, 1 on the sideboard. 1 Ursoc's Fury. This is a form, and it puts your hero in bear form. It's also instant, so we can just kind of leave up our mana and add a form into play. And it has 1, and then you tap the ability and ready your hero. So this lets us really alpha strike our opponent down. If we can just get Assault 5 or 10, then an Ursoc's Fury is going to let us attack, untap, and attack again. So that was kind of our plan. We were like a control deck that OTKs, or 1 turn, kills them, in theory. Or kills them in 2 or 3 attacks. Here's some more forms, just to make sure we can enable our Feral Charge. This is Savage Bear Form. 2 mana, instant speed, your hero has Protector and +5 health. We're really just playing this as a 2-of, that's just a couple extra forms, and a +5 health might be the key to letting us survive just long enough to get the Alpha Strike off. We also have 2 Bashes. Your hero's in bear form, and when it enters play, you can exhaust target hero or ally. This is a pretty low power level card here, so we're just playing this as a 2-mana way to exhaust something, save a little bit of attacker health. We can exhaust a Protector and get in. And giving us an abundance of 2 also means our concerted efforts almost always is able to find something good, or at least something. It may not be something good, but something. We also have Ironbark Cat Form. This is a new one from Mists, a 3-mana instant cat form The next time damage will be dealt to a hero or ally this turn, prevent it. And then your hero has Assault 2. That part's ongoing. So this just comes in like a Paladin-style bubble. Boom, stops one instance of damage, and then you gain an ongoing Assault 2. This helps if your opponent has like a big Dadak trigger or something that's going to deal 5 to you and heal 5. Well, you can just prevent it so they don't heal. Going back to our abilities, we have a new one here. Echoes of Thunder. This is Intimidating Roar. It's kind of like Squall Totem. It's a 1-mana instant. Play only if you control a form. Exhaust each opposing hero or an ally. So it's not like a lot of value out of it long term. You just get to pay 1, tap their board down. Just useful control tool. We're not really trying to do a huge late game control. This is just a simple, cheap tool to help us survive. Chew Toy. If you control a form, destroy target ally. So this is a nice removal spell that basically kills any ally, and we wanted to be able to kill mounts specifically. It was a big deal. We have a lot of attack and assault in this deck, and Chew Toy gives us a way to, maybe if our hero can't attack, or just a simple, cheap way, and again, another 2 cost, a cheap way to kill allies, and the fact that it's 2 means it's another spell we can pick up with concerted efforts. It gives us lots of choice. We already showed you Feral Charge. That is one of the best abilities for this deck, and a reason to try Feral out. Here's Berserk, one you don't get to see very often. It requires a Feral hero. Instant speeds, you can just throw it in there. While your hero has bear form, when it's dealt combat damage, you may draw a card. So if you are in bear form and your opponent's hitting you with a bunch of tokens and cheap allies, and hopefully with bear form in, Berserk can at least let you draw a few cards to maybe help stabilize or get that OTK. And if you have cat form, whenever you deal combat damage to an opposing hero, you can make them discard a card. That doesn't come up very often. This ability ended up being pretty underpowered, but the idea was there. Okay, we've got Regrowth here. A 2-cost instant ongoing ability. When you attach it to your hero, you heal 4 instantly, and then at the start of your turn, you heal 1. This ended up being a great inclusion. There were so many matches where it came down to the wire. There's a lot of burn decks now and just general linear aggro decks, and if you can't clear their board, you can heal yourself up just long enough to either climb out of lethal range or give yourself the ability to kind of combo out with your attacks. I did like having some regrowths in this deck, and having 3 means we can resource 1 early if it's bad, still access them later, and again, another even card that we can grab with concerted efforts. Claw and Fist Style. Here's a new one that was kind of an enabler for Monk, plus some dual class synergy. It's a 3-cost ongoing. Your hero has Assault 1. For each 2 abilities you control, your hero has an additional Assault 1. I wanted this as kind of a backup for Wild Incarnation. There's only 2 of them in the deck, and in this deck, Wild Incarnation ended up just completely overshadowing what this thing was trying to do. Basically, you got like Assault 4 or 5 from each of these, so this giving you an Assault 2 or 3 for a much higher cost was usually not worth it. But in theory, it's there. It's a cool card. Let's go check out some more interaction. We have 1 Hibernate. It's pay 2 instant ability, put target non-token ally into its owner's resource row face down, then exhaust it. I just wanted a way to get rid of certain allies like Dadak who can heal, and without triggering his damage effect. Just putting him in the resource row. This thing also kills Deathfear, who is typically a really hard to kill ally. We have 3 natural orders just to kill an ability or equipment. It's one of the nice things about playing Druid. You just get access to these high utility cards. Again, another even card for concerted efforts to pick up. We have 2 Ruin or Recalls. This is a nice one. Choose 1, destroy target ability, or put target ability from your graveyard into your hand, and then remove this. So if your opponent's blown up your good ongoing abilities early on, later on your Ruin or Recall can just pick them back up. Or it's just ability removal number 4 and number 5. And to round things out for the interaction suite, we have 4 Innervates. Well, it's not really interaction, huh? But it's a solid Druid card. Pay 4, draw 3. Classic has gone up in speed so much that I don't know that Innervate's as good as it used to be. But it's another even card off concerted efforts. It's easy to find, and it lets us expend our resources early game or just dump stuff onto the board and get a nice solid reload. And we have so many sources for even cards with concerted effort that we kind of have a wealth of choices. Do you need card advantage? Do you need removal? Do you need removal? Do you have some interrupt that you want to grab in response? There's a lot of tools here. But the main card here was Vestements. So, again, one of the things you want to do with Vestements is use it every turn, and at the time we were using it responsively. And you want to keep playing abilities to stack it up as well. So we showed you Wild Incarnation. You're going to get a bunch of Assault from this. And Ursoc's Fury is going to let you untap so you can attack twice or get through some protectors and do like the combo attack. What are the other tools we have here? So if you're going to use it reactively, you have Barkskin. Your opponent can counter it something, and then on the stack you can tap your armor and put a Barkskin into play from the sideboard so that your ability, ally, and equipment cards can't be interrupted, even though your opponent's already played his interrupt. So you get to like basically 2 for 1 your opponent, and then it's just 1 sideboard slot to completely dominate some matchups where interrupts play a key role, especially with all the new warriors and how many free interrupts they're playing nowadays. Cyclone. This was a strong one for sure. Having access to these, especially at instant speed, Cyclone just pay 1, you attach it to something and they can't attack for 3 turns. Every turn you take a counter off and then Cyclone dies. So it's a temporary removal spell, but it's cheap. And the fact that you can throw it on particularly a hero means that you can just completely shut down opposing hero decks that are reliant on attacking, like a warrior or a rogue. It's pretty detrimental to them. And for a measly 1 counter, what ends up being like a 5th or a 6th of your card, it generates so much card advantage if their deck is dedicated to attacking. We've got a 4th Regrowth. It's nice to be able to stack up heals, and having it out of the sideboard at instant speed, your opponent just sometimes is like going to overcommit resources, and you get a little bit of heals here and there, and suddenly their plan is ruined. And the Regrowths synergize particularly well with Nourish. It's an ongoing ability. It costs 3 or 3 counters from your armor. If damage would be healed from your hero, that much plus 5 is healed instead. So this was great because Regrowth heals instantly and at the start of your turn. So if you already had a Regrowth in play, like, I don't know, let's say from turn 2, and then you ended up putting a Nourish in, it does nothing when you attach it, but at the start of your turn, your Regrowth triggers, heal 1, and then boom, you're actually healing 6. So I had some games where my opponents almost got me close, and then I just completely shut the game down from healing like 15. It was just not even close. And then you don't really need powerful removal and sweepers. You just overpower them with the proactive elements of your deck. So Nourish plus healing is still a very powerful Druid combo. And then we have 1 Ironbark Cat Form in the sideboard. This was just going to be an instant speed way. If my opponent had some huge burn spell, I could just tap and put the Cat Form in play and prevent that damage. That's 7 sideboard slots. Then we had the other 3 as 3 Scourge of Lordaeron. So we had some graveyard hate. But those are just brought in. Nothing you can do with the armor there. Let's take a look at the quest base, or actually the hero. You didn't get to see that. This is a Feral Druid Night Elf, and the flip is pay 1, flip, and then you gain Bear Form, which gives you Protector, but that part's kind of useless. This was only there to give you a reliable way to trigger Feral Charge and Chew Toy, because technically your hero's going into Feral. It's getting a Bear Form. In case I didn't have anything in play and I had these cards in my hand. It's still kind of slow because it costs 1 mana to do, so you can only do this little combo on turn 3 or later. But we're kind of a reactive control deck, so I was okay with that. Also, because we're playing Wild Incarnation, which counts the number of forms you have and gives you Assault 1, just being able to pay 1 and get an extra Assault 1 from your hero, or if you have multiple Incarnations in play, then you're getting an extra 2 or 3 Assault from turning your hero into Bear Form for the 4th or 5th time. So that was a nice viable way to do that, and a way to spend our mana late game if we're untapping and attacking and gaining multiple stacks of Assault. You can kind of see where this deck really preyed on the Feral Assaults. And looking at the quests, we already showed you Concerted Efforts, by far the best quest in this deck. Worthy of Passing just lets you exhaust a whole bunch of stuff and draw cards. This is kind of becoming an all-star. Early game, you can just use it to essentially draw 1, and you're often paying 0 or 1 for it. Later in the game, when you get an abundance of abilities in play, you can draw 2 or 3 from it, occasionally a little bit more. I only went with 3 of them because we do kind of want to play as an instant speed deck, and this thing only works on your own turn, so I didn't want to be locked into having all these, and then you have like interrupts that you can't play. So we went with 3 for now. A Question of Gluttony, it's just cheap card draw. We often do have plenty of cards in hand between Innervate and our decent quests. And once we have an armor in play, we don't really need to play that many cards. Like, this thing is going to win the game in a few turns. So A Question of Gluttony was just a nice cheap way to draw cards. Nothing new there. Forces of Jaedenar, if you played an ability, pay 1, draw a card. So simple card draw. And there are times even having to pay 1 to draw a card was rough. But with this many abilities in our deck and a solo deck, this thing was solid. And then a single Zapped Giants. Just pay 2, reveal the top 3, put an ability into your hand, and put the rest in the bottom. This kind of functioned like another one of these Concerted Efforts, just lets us pick up almost any card in the deck because they're almost all abilities, except for our armor here. Well, that was the deck. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, Vestements was slightly changed, and probably for good reason. A little bit too much utility, and you are a feral attacking deck, but there were times when it felt like you were just a prison deck, and your opponents were. I kind of heard some feedback about that. But anyways, Feral's a fun deck. Hope you would like to try it. Another cool thing you can do is go Horde with this deck. Now, we went Alliance for concerted efforts because it helps us find a whole bunch of even cards, including our armor. But if you decide to go Horde, you can play the odd version of this, which finds 1s, 3s, and 5s, which means you can just play a bunch of Wild Incarnations, so all 4 and 4 Ursoc's Fury main, so you get to play more of your best cards main deck. You're way less grindy at that point, but you're a lot more all in on just hoping you draw good and giving you some filter to find your good odd cards. It does mean you're not going to draw your even cards quite as often, but it's a trade-off, and it's certainly something to consider to play the Horde Feral Druid hero rather than the Alliance. And that flip, I believe, lets you sacrifice a form and just kill something, which is a nice way to deal with Vuzdin, who's an ally who turns off your abilities, which you should see in the league somewhere where Vuzdin's kind of a problem for this deck. Anyways, that's the deck. Hope you enjoy.